Okay, we're back. Thanks for sticking around. It's lesson 8, and we're working on our shopping cart. We've done the easy stuff. We're getting into the pieces that are a little bit complex. So the first thing we need to do is we need to address this customer ID. So we've basically got 3 possibilities here. Possibility number 1, somebody's logged in. Well, that's easy. We have access to their email address if they're logged in. But the majority of our shoppers are not going to be logged in. So if someone isn't logged in, we've got to check 2 things. Number 1, is there already something in their cart? If there isn't, if this is the first item that's going in their cart, we're going to need to generate some kind of identifier to attach to this user session before we save. And then if they add subsequent items to their cart, we can use that same identifier again. So in here, we're going to make actually, let's create a variable up here. Or get so this is going to give me an error because we're going to make this method in a minute. And then we're going to change this down here to our customer ID variable. So we now need to write this method and the logic that goes inside of it. So we're going to have a private string called getCustomerID. So once we define this method, our error goes away here. So the first thing we want to check the session for an existing customer ID. If we don't already have session, check if customer is logged in. We'll put all the comments in first and then we'll write the code. So if the person is logged in, which will happen occasionally, but most of the time people are going to shop anonymously. So if the customer is anonymous, use GUID to create a new identifier. And so this is what we're doing. We're looking, do we already have an existing customer ID? If we don't, we're checking if the customer's logged in. If they're not, we're going to need to use a GUID to create some kind of identifier to attach to the particular user. Oops. So to access the session, we need to access the .NET HTTP context class. And in here, this is where the session object lives. And we can call getString. So this is going to check for a variable called customer ID. So if this is null, I'm going to bring this all the way down here. So if it's null, the cart is empty. currently. So we now need to figure out if the customer's logged in or not. Now we get an error here. Whoops. We're going to check for no. So in this case, we'll just initialize it as an empty string. So is our customer logged in? We'll check if their identity is authenticated. Otherwise, we'll need to use a GUID. So if they are logged in, we can take their name property, which will be their email address. If they're not logged in, we need to generate a new GUID. So we call getString up here to try to read the session variable. We can call setString. Whoops. Sorry, we do it this way. Got my syntax wrong. 2 parameters for setString. The name of the variable, and then the value we want to set. Now we still need to then return the session variable. So we call getString on our customer ID. So when this method's called, if we've already got a session variable called customer ID, we just return that value. If our session variable is empty, we go to our next decision. Is the customer already logged in? If they are, we can use their email address. If they're not logged in, we're just going to generate a GUID. And in either case, we're then going to set the session variable. So if they add something else to the cart, this check is going to run again, and we just return the value. Let me grab this code. The logic is a bit complex. Give you a minute to catch up. So I've put the link here for you if you need it. So I'm going to run this with my debugger on so we can actually watch what happens. I think there's something else we're going to need to do, but let's try this. So I'll put a breakpoint here where we try to set the customer ID, and we can watch the logic, try to watch the logic inside here. I'm going to shop as an anonymous user. So I'm going to start my debugger. You can try to run yours if you like. We can also just observe what happens with my version first. I'm not expecting this to fully work because I think there is one other step we haven't done yet. The code in our controller is right, but we have not configured our site for session support. In other languages, it's automatic because .NET Core is really lightweight. It doesn't support sessions by default. So let's go to my store. So I'm an anonymous user. Let's see what happens here. Click on my store. Want to buy some beer. It's Tuesday, so Taco Tuesday. I want a couple of Dos Equis to go with my fish tacos for dinner. So I click add, and let's see what happens here. So we've got the current date and time, got our price, and let's see what happens as we step through. So it calls get customer ID. First thing it's going to do is check for our session variable. Is there already a value in customer ID? And we get an error. Session has not been configured. So we can't use this code yet until we configure our app for session support. That's okay, no big deal. We'll just let it crash. I'll stop my debug. Well, my debugging stops. So what file do you suppose we would need to go into to configure session support? Where in our app would we do that? Same file we've been configuring other things. Yep, you got it. Thanks, Nick. So let's go into startup. And we've got to do it in two places. Inside configure services, I'm going to add it here before the controllers with views. We want to enable session support services dot use session. Sorry. So we're going to add session to store user identities for the shopping cart. So we're going to call add session in configure services, and we're going to call use session in the configure method. And it's important where this goes in the configure method. This has to go before, we want it to go before the used endpoints. So before the URL mapping, so we're going to call use session here. So we call use session in configure and add session in configure services. I'm going to run my code with the debugger again. So again, we can watch the logic inside that method where we're trying to figure out an identifier for this customer, whether it's their username or whether it's a unique identifier that we can store along with their session. So I'm going to run it again. I've still got my breakpoint here. So I'll start it up again. So I'm going to try and put something in the cart and we'll watch what happens. Go to the store. I'll try my same product again. Click add to cart. So we'll try the method again now. So first it tries to read the session for a variable called customer ID. This is null. This session variable is null. So our code goes in here. We're initializing our customer ID variable as null. Am I authenticated? No, I'm not. Right. I'm shopping over here. My username isn't here, so I'm anonymous. So I have no identifier in the session, and I'm not logged in. So what's going to happen? It's going to generate a new GUID for me. 6DE, etc. It's now going to write this value into a session variable, and then it's going to return this as a string. So now my customer ID is this new GUID that starts with the number 6. Now I can proceed to save my object to the database. So here's my product ID, my quantity. So the debugger lets me inspect the properties we're about to save. So I've set up each value. It calls save changes, and it redirects where I get this error. That's okay. Now if I look in my browser, it's saved my new cart object, and now it's tied to my existing session, my GUID. So now in the same browser, I'm going to add another product to cart, and we can see the logic. It should keep this customer ID. So the two products will be related. So I'll just go back to my store. My debugger's still running. I've got a couple Dos Equis. I want a Corona Light as well. So this time, when it checks the session variable, right, it just skips me right down to the bottom. The first time I put an item in my cart, my session variable was null, so we had to run through this logic to generate a customer ID session variable. Now I have it because my sessions persisted. So now it will just return. And if we see my customer ID, it's that same GUID. It's now stored in the session as Bensei recommended. So now I'm saving a different product, quantity 1. So now these two items are attached together. Let's just try this. I'll try it in a different browser as well to make sure that I get a different customer ID in this case. So now I'm in Chrome. I can go and buy the same product. I'll buy a Dos Equis as a Chrome user. But notice my customer ID is null because in Chrome, oops. My session only exists in Firefox. In Chrome, considers me a completely different user. I'm not logged in. So it's going to generate a separate GUID in Chrome that starts with an 8. And I'll just continue the process. So now I've got the same customer ID in Firefox, but in Chrome it's different because it's tied to my session. Okay, so our logic now, and stop my debugger, the logic is working the way we need it to. Now I could also try, I guess I should also try if I'm logged in. We didn't try that version, so I'll log in maybe in a private window and see if I put something in the cart when I'm logged in, it should use my email address. So I'll just go over to a private window. So I'm going to log in here as customer 1. I'll go to my store. I'll buy a couple of pail riders. So when I shop as a logged in user, it pulls my email address. So if I add multiple items in the cart, add a couple of those. So obviously this is simpler when someone's logged in. We can just grab their email, attach their shopping cart to their email, no problem. This way, when we're logged in, the cart also persists even if we close our browser and come back, because it's not really based on the user session, it's based on their email address. So our logic is, I think, where we need it to be in our get customer ID method. It is a bit confusing because there are a bunch of different scenarios that we need to account for. There's only one other thing I want to do today, but are there any questions about this method before we move on to just building the cart page? Well, we're not using a cookie in this case. We're using a session which is stored on the server. It's not actually a cookie. Leo, it's a fair question, but in general, when we use the sessions and cookies are not the same. The browser keeps track of, sorry, the server keeps track of it. That doesn't tell us very much. I don't know. I'll have to do some more research. I don't see it. I don't know. You may be right, but generally they're stored on the server. How the mechanics of exactly how that happens, I don't know. So for example, this session interface is a unique identifier. It's not the same as the cookie. Whether it uses a cookie under the hood, I'm not sure. Right. So I want to build the cart page and we can scaffold it so it won't take us too long, and then we'll just make a few changes. Okay. So in our store controller, in our cart method, before we return the view, we need to write a bit of code that will actually go and fetch the current cart. Okay. Fetch the current cart for display. Let's initialize our customer ID. We'll do this. I think. We'll check the session. So we'll need this method in case the user just goes straight to the cart page when they come to our site. We don't have a cart link right now, but we'll add one next week. So we want to fetch the list of cart items from the carts table, but only for this customer. We don't want everything in the cart table, only the ones that are attached to our current user. And then we'll pass it. So now we can scaffold this view and we can make a few little changes to it, and we'll call it a day. I will give you the code back here. So here's our new cart method. For today, we don't really need this part, but we'll need it later once we add a cart link to our nav bar. Because a user might go to the cart, they might leave our site and just come back and go straight to their cart. So if we don't have this check, so now I just want to create our store cart view. We can use scaffolding to generate it. So I'll go to my Solution Explorer. I'll right-click my Views Store folder. I'll choose Add, View. I a razor view. I don't want it to be empty because we want to use scaffolding to generate a lot of this HTML for us. So pick razor view. Our view name will be cart. Our model will be list. We want this page to show all the items in the user shopping cart. Our model class is cart. And our data context should default to application DB context. We want to reference script libraries and use our layout page. So our name is cart, our template is list, and our model is cart. I'll leave this up for a minute. And you can see the path in my Solution Explorer as well. This is under Views and Store. So choose these options, cart, list, cart. And then click the Add button. So this will build an initial shopping cart page for us. We'll make sure it works, and then we can reformat it more next week. So here's our page. Gives us a table. It's not exactly what we want, but we'll clean it up a bit and we'll finish it next week. Won't keep you too much longer today. So I'll add okay, so let's see what's here. It added to my cart, but our query is not quite right. Let's look at why. What did we miss? Whoops. I should do it this way. Else. If we've already got it in the session, so I never filled my customer ID. We could probably write this with a ternary operator, might be easier. I'll leave it this way for now and I'll rewrite it to be more efficient next week. Just try again. So when I restart my server, I get a new session variable. It kills my old session. We'll try again. Again, I'll put Guinness in my cart. So it's not a great shopping cart, but it's recording the right data. I want a couple Coronas. So obviously we need to reformat this page. We don't want to see the customer ID. We don't need the date created. We want the product name and probably the product image. And we want to change these links. So it might be, we want maybe remove these and we'll just have a remove link. We also aren't going to have a create new link. So this page isn't done, but it's functional. It's showing the right data now. Okay, we've done a lot with this today. I think this is a good place for us to stop for the day so that next week we can clean up the format on our cart. We can add a remove from cart. We can show the total, as Mitch suggested earlier. And then we can add a checkout button or a keep shopping button. And when they click checkout, then we want to go to a billing page with payment. We can process a payment and generate an order confirmation page that is visible both by a customer as well as by a site administrator. So next week, probably we're not going to be done by 4 o'clock either. There's a fair bit we want to do. I'm going to push my changes up so you've got reference to it. Does anybody have any questions for today? So you do have a quiz for this week. And just a reminder that assignment 2, part 1, adding your authentication and Google sign in, that's due before next week's class. So you've got your quiz and you've got assignment 2, part 1, which is due worth 10%. So make sure you complete that for next week, please. Okay, well, have a great week. Code is on GitHub. If you need any help or you have questions, then feel free to send me an email, or we could try and set up an appointment if you need one. Okay, thanks for your patience today. We'll try and wrap up our cart next week. Have a great week, and I will see you then.